talk a little bit about mobility and why we're interested in this, in particular from the point of view of understanding patterns related to gender and socioeconomics. Okay, so it was very nice actually to have the talk this morning in the keynote, because I really enjoyed the sentence that something happened somewhere, right? And from our point of view that are interested in human mobility, I have to say that, well, we also, if we want to do something, we have to go somewhere, right? And this is what we try to study in human mobility, is try to find patterns and predictability of people going to places, how predictable we are. And it turns out that we are very predictable, right? All these studies, and there is a lot of study being done in human mobility, and most of them look at patterns in general, right? So, for instance, how predictable we are, let's say in the morning, how predictable we are in the afternoon. And it turns out, as I said, we are really predictable species because we like regularities. But not a lot has been done from the point of view of disaggregating this, understanding those patterns when we divide, for instance, when we slice it based, for instance, in gender and socioeconomics, which is what we're going to do here, right? So things such as, I mean, traffic congestion exists because of the synchronization that I think Ricardo was also alluding to. We synchronize our activities and it generates traffic. I mean, mobility is important in epidemics, is important in social structures, right? We form friendships because we meet people somewhere, like for instance, like in this event, okay? So we want to see then is what happens when we look at those patterns for women and men, right? And when we look at socioeconomics of those patterns in urban environments. So why we want to study this? Well, we know that the social constructs that exist impose different, I suppose, responsibilities to different genders. For instance, we take from the point of view here, there is, unfortunately, a lot more men in high-paid jobs than women, right? There are, for instance, this association that women have to be responsible for child care. So, and this is reflected, and what we wanted to find out is if this is reflected, for instance, in their patterns around urban environments. From the point of view of socioeconomics, if you make more money, then you have access to more, I guess, resources in terms of transportation modes, so which means that you may be allowed to travel further distances than women, okay? So which is what we're trying to actually show here. So what is the hypothesis? The hypothesis is that there should be some different concentrations on different concentrations of men and women in urban environments, as well as different concentrations from the point of view of socioeconomics, right? Due to the social constructs that exist, spatial opportunities. And the main message I want to have today here is to say that when we move differently, we are exposed to different opportunities, right? So if I'm not allowed to go to several places, it means that I will be exposed to less opportunities in terms of job, forming friendships, and so on and so forth. So if there are inequalities already in terms of gender and socioeconomics, if we do not fix the social display or the mobility displacement of those individuals, we can actually exacerbate the problem. So let's look at an example here, and I have only 2 slides. The paper, we sliced this in several different aspects, but here you see a map of São Paulo, and I'm showing São Paulo. We did this study with São Paulo, Medellin, and Bogota. I'm showing São Paulo mostly because São Paulo, if you've been to São Paulo, does not have a lot of geographical accidents, so you have a more uniform distribution. There's no mountains in São Paulo, let's say, right? And what you can observe is just, if you look at the picture in general, I don't know if there's a pointer here. So you can see a tendency towards green, right? And not a lot towards red. So there is, what this is demonstrating to us is that men travel farther, right? Which means that they will be exposed to more opportunities than women. So there is a even distribution in the center of the city and an uneven distribution towards men, towards the periphery. The same happens in Bogota once you account for the fact that there's a mountain here, so there are mountain ranges that we have to kind of consider when analyzing those kind of cities. The picture from the point of view of I guess, socioeconomics is a little bit more complicated. And it's hard to actually have this in the visualization, but I'm going to try to tell you. So if you try to imagine here the center, and then you have those white areas, it means that there is a lot more well-balanced travels from lower class, upper class, and middle class, and this is why you have this tendency towards white, right? And middle class, so it's hard to see, but you can probably see that around the center, there is a tendency to green or green-blue or green-yellowish on the periphery here, which means that middle class individuals tend to be more spread out around the city. Okay? So the take-home message is that now if you put this, the differences in socioeconomics is a lot more prominent than the differences in gender, if I go back here, right? But if you combine, I suppose, the socioeconomics, for instance, when we analyze poor women with rich men, let's say, then the differences in terms of opportunities that they can expose can be 10 times actually higher towards men, again, exacerbating the problem, right? So what we found in this paper, so I'll have a link for the paper in the next slide, so is that men tend to actually travel farther, particularly for work travels. So upper class tend to be more concentrated in the center of the city. And the socioeconomic differences, as I mentioned before, are much higher than the gender differences, although there are statistically significant differences in terms of gender as well. Right? So this work is a work of Mariana, who works in the group, is supervised by Hugo, in collaboration with Laura, who is from provide us the data for Colombia, and actually did the analysis in Colombia for us, and then also Alessio Cardillo, who's used to be in university in Spain and now moved, I think, to Zaragoza. Okay, so appreciate. Thanks for your attention. Thanks a lot.